united in diversity. We are very heterogeneous in our opinion.
If we do not renew our partnerships with the rest of the world, Europe will not be relevant.
We can make it if we are together as Europeans.
Do you genuinely believe that countries will manage to reach these very ambitious targets?
Hello, everyone. My name is Antoinette Rossi, and I'm the cybersecurity reporter at POLITICO. And today we're here to talk about competitiveness, which, as most of you, or all of you will know, is a priority for the next European Commission. When we think about competitiveness, growth and innovation, cybersecurity doesn't immediately come to mind. But it can be argued that it is the foundation of a digital economy. The average cost of a ransomware attack, where a crime group hijacks a company's data and asks for ransom, has risen by 13% in the last 5 years, and today costs an average of $1.5 million per incident in 2023. In the last year, the EU has put forward around 6 pieces of cyber legislation, including the first ever legislation to ensure the security of products throughout the supply chain, and to try and up the security of the digital single market. Yet voices from industry will often tell you that too much regulation actually harms innovation. But could regulation in cybersecurity create more trust for EU companies over their competitors? With me to discuss the topic is Florian Pennings, sitting in the middle, Associate Chief Cybersecurity and Operational Officer at ENISA, the EU Cybersecurity Agency, Stefan de Guin, CEO of the Cyber Peace Institute, and Paolo Palumbo, Vice President with cybersecurity firm with Secure Intelligence. If you like the panel, remember to mention it on your social media with the hashtag Politico Competitive Week. So let me sit down and let us begin. Florian, I'm going to start with you. You've worked on both sides of the fence. So you recently left Microsoft to join ENISA, and before that you were with the Dutch cybersecurity agencies. What does cybersecurity regulation do for innovation and competitiveness?
Thanks, and thanks for inviting ENISA and myself on the stage. So, as I have worked on public and private, and it's also something that I really wanted to do, to see both sides, so and swinging back again because the public cause really kept calling, is that you get an understanding of how regulation really impacts the industry. And it impacts industry in good ways, and also in sometimes ways that industry players don't really appreciate. So you need to have a constant dialogue. That constant dialogue is always in Brussels. That's something that I really learned over the last 5 years. Even though some people might say, oh, it's not transparent, it's actually quite transparent, and Politico does a great job in also supporting there. So kudos there. If you then look at the role for innovation in that, the regulation itself sometimes is not innovative, but it does push companies, and let me just say on the company side, it does push companies to gain more expertise, to prepare themselves to be more compliant. That means that employees need to be skilled. They need to do trainings. They need to have discussions. Processes need to be developed, and that's actually a pretty good thing. And that sometimes, from my experience, having worked for one of these big companies, that really helps. On the other side, and we often forget that, and I believe that the NIS2 directive is a great example of this, it also requires from member states and also from an ENISA and the European Commission to also gain more expertise, to be an equal partner for those industry players. And on both sides, I can tell you from experience, we have to do a little bit more. That's precisely a place where I think ENISA can help with studies and expertise. So there's definitely an opportunity and surely a momentum right now with CRA and NIS2, DORA, etc.
CRA being the Cyber Resilience Act.
Cyber Resilience Act, yes.
Trying to minimize the acronyms. But, you know, one of the things in the CRA, Cyber Resilience Act, that I will just tell people about, in case they're unaware, is it requires companies to report vulnerabilities, unpatched vulnerabilities, within 24 hours to 48 hours, depending on sort of the scale of the attack. And a lot of companies were really worried about that, because essentially you're saying, we're being attacked and we don't know how to handle this yet. And no one wants to admit that the house is on fire because, it makes them look like they're not doing their job properly, when actually the point is that they are being transparent, and that, basically everyone in every sector is getting attacked right now. It's just a daily occurrence, but there's still this sort of embarrassment almost to be open about it. And I think, they're scared that, understandably, they're scared it will hurt their business.
Yeah.
Paula, do you want to add anything on to Florian's yes?
First of all,
I can come back to this. Huh?
Let me also say that it's a pleasure for me to be here. I think that there's a bit of a stigma still associated with the fact of going out and saying, hey, the product we are making has a fault, a vulnerability. We know about it, and there is a risk associated with it. There's a stigma to it. At the same time, when we think from another perspective, the fact of going out, providing visibility, acknowledging there's a problem, and also notifying that there's actions being taken to address it is the right thing to do. What is not the right thing to do is to keep it under wraps, hoping that no attacker would eventually come up with the same information through we don't know which means, and then make things public in an uncontrolled way, putting everybody at risk. For certain kind of products, this would be a disaster, given how widespread some of these are. So I think yes, the stigma is there, but if we want our business to be competitive, and also I want to piggyback on something that was said a moment ago, the concept of improving needs to be baked into how we do business. So for us to improve and to elevate our operations, we need to say, there is a vulnerability, I need to be ready to react to the process of having this vulnerability discovered in my product, and be as quick as possible in creating mitigations for those and making them available effectively. Mitigations also means communicating, fixes being published, having channels to publish those mitigations and so forth. So.
And in a way, I guess being a first mover on cybersecurity regulation in the world with the Cyber Resilience Act, with NIS2, could actually help companies in the EU look like they're more trustworthy, and then it sort of forces to, change around the globe, essentially. Not immediately, but, the US is now talking with Brussels to find out, how the Cyber Resilience Act is going to work, how they could probably, kind of copy it with the cyber trust mark. And so maybe it's a good thing?
I would say it is. I think it is stimulating, creating a solid foundation for companies to drive towards an improvement. I have to be very careful here because, of course, the regulation that is coming, I think there was a mention of some of the major regulation pieces that are either coming into effect in the next few weeks, like NIS2, we have DORA next year, CRA, and to throw the CSA as well into this discussion. They will impose significant burden on many organizations, especially those that are smaller in size, like the mid-market. And at the same time, we need to look at it from a long-term perspective. This burden that might be impacted on the companies in the short term will eventually lead to a much better security posture for these companies, and that will be reflected in a much better security posture for the whole of Europe, especially considering the situation in which we are now, where there is a significant need to defend our organization and our institutions.
Stefan, your role is a little bit different in terms of, you're an NGO, and recently on Monday you had this event in The Hague, and you tried to, shine a light on the challenges that NGOs face with cyber attacks. So I know it's not exactly competitiveness, but maybe you can talk about if there's some overlapping challenges there with industry.
No, with pleasure. Because you mentioned it, so we launched this global action plan in order to provide cybersecurity and digital resilience to NGOs globally, including safe use of AI into their operation. And this is about competitiveness. In the sense that NGO-specific market that are targeted by all type of cyber attacks, by all type of attackers. There's not so many markets like this. And with zero capacity to defend themselves because systematically the way they fund it prevent them to organize cybersecurity. And the theory is that if you're an NGO and you're cybersecure, you're going to be much more impactful to your end user than if not. So you're competitive in the, I would say, social impact space, because at the end, this is what it's all about. So it's the same rationale. You also have a bunch of NGOs that are not known about, and also a more loose non-profit or volunteer group, which are today developing protocols, algorithms that are servicing the whole internet. We may not know about this, but a lot of things that we use every day works because someone in the middle of the weekend decide, to work on this, make it secure, update it, so that you can download the next update. And these are not nor government nor private sector. And there's a huge lack of funding on these entities, and they will be impacted potentially also by the Cyber Resilience Act in terms of this vulnerability reporting with zero capacity to do it. They have already little capacity to do their job. So on top of that, enforcing compliance is going to be complicated. And that's the comment to the question before, is that, I've been 25 years in law enforcement, so my DNA is about enforcing the law. So regulation, yes, of course. So that's not the issue there. But the regulation is as good as the implementation muscle that you put into it. And the problem today is that in between the AI Act, the Digital Services Act, what's happening now in the conversation among the Cyber Resilience Act, I think blindness in how this framework are impacted by other decision-making on the regulation space, like the EU saying that the Cybercrime Treaty is a good idea, I still would like to see the plan of implementation. To be sure that not to create uncompetitiveness, because part of the world is going to seek to implement something and then it will kill industry and NGOs because they just cannot implement, while everyone else is looking and say, let's continue to do our business until it touches. So, and it's not a science fiction scenario. I saw that when we were working in Europol on terrorist content online, so Daesh and Al-Qaeda propaganda, which was flooding network. And you could see two types of companies, the one that are the muscle in order to implement trust and safety and etc., because they could get money, and the very small startup, non-profit, which are they were trying to provide a social service in terms of communication. And they were hammered because they could not implement regulation.
Yeah. And it's the same with the NIS2 directive. There's such a variety of implementation across countries. Some are nowhere close to the deadline, which is coming up now on 17th of October, and some have already done it, like Belgium. So it's also about resources, right? Like the thing is, often cybersecurity is still thought of as an add-on. It's like we spend money for, pencils and staff salaries and whatever the costs of running an operation. And then we think about cybersecurity. But the thing is, if you get hacked, it's going to cost so much money, and then people regret it and think, why didn't I take out cyber insurance? But it's still an afterthought. Paolo, I'm sure you're nodding there. I'm sure you've seen your fair share of horror stories.
Yes, I think this is your comment is something that I strongly agree with. What we are seeing is that no matter how much we speak about it, no matter how much cyber attacks continues to be extensively reported on, no matter how much the count or the dollar value associated with the damage is growing, there is still people who consider to be cybersecurity to be an auxiliary activity as opposed to be an enabler of business, right? Without cybersecurity and without a proper risk management approach inside companies are in a position of not being resilient enough. When I think about ransomware, right, we all hear about ransomware. It's a threat we all are very familiar with. Ransomware is something that, so whenever somebody is a victim of ransomware, their operations as a business are halted. There is a significant operational damage coming from this. They cannot operate, they cannot make money.
They're losing money, in fact,
exactly.
by the hour.
not only that, there is a reputational damage because often the ransomware attacks comes with exfiltration of data, which then is associated with blackmailing or threats to exposing the data. And this is even not the full picture because very often when I, as a victim of ransomware, cannot operate, I'm also impacting financial damage on the downstream of my supply chain, which might as well not being able to operate. So when we look at things from this perspective, it's critical to be able to be in a position of defending yourself, of preventing cyber attacks as much as possible. And this doesn't come necessarily by buying a suite of software, but it comes even from a much more generic approach of thinking of cybersecurity from the get-go, baking into your production processes, baking into your decisional processes, and not just waking up when the problem comes and say, oh, I should have done cybersecurity. Let me buy that piece of technology that makes me secure. So, yes, I would like to drive the transformation further and make sure that companies understand really the fundamental value of what we're discussing here.
There was, and I'm sorry to bring up your former employer, Florian, but recently, I'm sure you all remember in July, the global outage that basically ground planes across the world because of a security update to CrowdStrike. And now at first, no one really knew if it was a cyber attack or what happened, but all we knew is that CrowdStrike is clearly everywhere and it affected everything. And it was, a really sort of obvious impact to digital security in our lives. And Microsoft actually said at the time, it accused the Commission that a 2009 agreement between the tech firm and the European Commission meant it could not make the necessary security changes that would have prevented the global outage caused by CrowdStrike. So because of EU competition law, it had to use CrowdStrike rather than using its own security update in order for sort of fairness. So sometimes we sort of shoot ourselves in the foot, right? Like, okay, we want to make sure that they're not these monopolies, but at the same time, then you risk using vendors that damage your credibility. I don't know who of you want to take this one, but I just find it an interesting cause and effect. Go on, Florian.
I'm sitting here with the ENISA hat, so this is also, let me dive into this. If you look at the first question that you asked about regulation, and let's take that as a framework, you've got the NIS2, you've got the need is really laid down in that legislation to look into supply chain and how that works. That's already incredibly difficult. As Paolo also mentioned, yes, you want to make sure at the board level sets aside budget and gives you the mandate within your organization to do that. I can also tell you that this is a discussion of 10, 15 years old and constantly pops up, so it's a constant investment. You will never get this 100% done because a company has to deal with other objectives that sometimes you as a public servant are just not aware of. So that requires constant dialogue. If you then look at the dependencies, because I do want to look a little bit about the dependencies of and in the supply chain, look at the NIS2. I like this as an example, right? Because everybody is aware to it. You already mentioned, in Belgium it's already implemented, others haven't. It's also super complex. Imagine that you're a CSIRT, and I don't know if they're representatives of a CSIRT or the National Competent Authority in the room.
What's a CSIRT, for those of us don't know?
Computer Security Incident Response Team. So these are the boys and the girls touching the buttons, getting a cybersecurity incident, and then mitigate or respond. So these are your experts, technical experts. Imagine that you're sitting in that operation room, and I think that you represent a good company that has expertise there to help. And suddenly now your constituency has been broadened from, it was 8 or 7, I don't know how many sectors, but it was a smaller group. The NIS2 has magnified this enormously. How can you expect from them to be aware of all these little details of these new sectors that are included? And then it includes the digital infrastructure in a different way than it did in the NIS Directive 1. So that adds complexity to these questions. But then you get the political request, supply chain, because that's a term we feel strongly about and we want you to implement that. But then you look to the experts and they just look at their little element and say, yeah, but this requires A, B, C, and D, and we need support from industry. Oh, but then that legislation is not correct. These are the challenges under the hood that we're working on. And we need industry and we need the governments to really help there and also help with resources to address this. That's, by the way, the biggest problem. But there's innovation in there too. There's competitive in there as well. So it's not a simple, clear, fix answer there. So that's what I want to add.
So what's ENISA doing to help?
Within the structures that are there, like the NIS Cooperation Group, we are working on the question of supply chain. Again, this is a very government to ENISA exercise. One of the reasons, I'll be honest, why I was also hired in this role, to look a little bit how can we shape that up with industry within the confines of our mandate and our legislation. By the way, the Cybersecurity Act review is coming up, so that also might be a nice opportunity to have another discussion around this. And at the same time, loads of reports, building our expertise. But again, we're an organization that's not as large as our partners like a BSI and ANSI. So we need to find smart ways to cooperate and get that expertise done. What I've seen a lot is that certain expertise lies so scattered around. Some people do the same things. We need to bring that together. That's a constant investment of ENISA, and it requires a lot of effort. But I'm sure we will get there at a certain stage because we have to. The threat landscape, as Paolo said, has changed immensely over the last 5 years. And geopolitical threats are now really an issue that ENISA also looks into. That wasn't the case 5-6 years ago. So the pressure is so high that we need to invest.
Stefan, what do you think about ENISA? Do they need a broader mandate? Do they need to do a better job?
Are they going to follow my advice? Or
Yeah,
just
yeah.
me saying
This is your chance.
It's my chance to change ENISA?
Yeah.
Wow. No, seriously enough, from my years in Europol, I guess it's still a bit of the same now. I always was mesmerized with this, I think it's cultural silos in between the cybersecurity world and the cybercrime fighting world. For a reason that we all know, cybersecurity is about making sure that everything is secure. You react as a first responder, like the firefighters of the thing, and law enforcement is more to investigate. But when you see how threat actors operate, we would, especially in the EU, we would value a lot of much more exchange of information between the two communities, because at the end of the day, this is one problem.
And they sit differently in the Commission, right?
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
cybercrime sits with Home and cybersecurity with DG Connect.
Yeah. And the thing is that in the mind of an attacker, when you walk through the cyber kill chain, what you do, if you want as a defender to look into it, you need cybersecurity skill and cybercrime investigation skill, going hand in hand on a singular process, and that's quite missing. At the same time, we don't facilitate our work and go back to the competitiveness and innovation because we are piling up so much regulation that instead of having one regulation that you get better and better and better to implement, we need every 6 months to adapt to a new one, understand how to implement it, retrain everyone with turnover in the agencies and etc. So, we have also to be realistic to the capacity to just follow up with what is happening.
Fair enough. I don't think we can talk about competitiveness in cybersecurity without mentioning certification schemes. And one of the, more controversial ones this year was the EUCS, which is the European Cloud Certification Scheme, which is still, by the way, being debated. I'm not sure if anyone is up to date, but it was very contentious because it's initially designed to harmonize cybersecurity standards across the EU in terms of cloud computing and where we keep our data. But at one point, it went beyond mere technical requirements, and it began sort of encompassing, location of a company's headquarters, primacy of EU law requirements, strict localization measures. And let's be honest, this was particularly pushed on by the French because they have a very sort of similar scheme called Secnum Cloud in their own country, and basically don't trust US cloud providers to keep EU data safe. And if law enforcement in the US wanted to tap into some of our critical data, they could. So it's become a very convoluted conversation about security with a sort of political nuance. And that's me explaining it in a very basic way. Do you think I did well?
You did.
So I think the reason I mention it is because it's a prime example of this, of wanting to ensure security, and obviously the big cloud giants are the most secure, or at least can be argued that they provide the best security because they have the most resources. But at the same time, how do we feel about our data being somewhere else, or being able to be looked at by foreign eyes? I'm just opening up the conversation to hear your thoughts. Paolo, maybe I start with you, since you guys are an EU company.
Yes.
But I'm sure you use US products, and that's because they're maybe the best, rather than just because they're, located somewhere.
I think we need to then, this is a discussion that could get rather technical, so I'll try to avoid that. But I think in general, a lot of European industry is forced to use technology that is extra-European for the particular reason that there is not a competitive alternative inside Europe.
Right.
So we start from a position that is quite challenging, right? At the same time, I do feel that going forward, I would like to move towards having some of this technology to be made inside the European Union and designed especially for the European Union, for its regulation, for its ways of working, for the requirements that we have in Europe. Now, is it an easy thing? Absolutely not, and it might never materialize. But that's something I feel we should strive for. Now, when we use technologies from these US vendors, we of course use them in a way that is sustainable. So we enable encryption that is end-to-end, at rest, in transit. We do make sure that we deploy in the right regions. But eventually, in the situation where we are today, of course, somebody from the mother company outside of the European Union might still have root access to all the systems that we use. And that is something that I would like to, over time, going away with it. Of course, the vendors are also very sympathetic to the situation. There is a lot of initiatives in terms of creating sovereign clouds.
Right.
And cloud is only one example. Operating systems are very similar topics. I think we need to start pushing in that direction. AI, I think was mentioned earlier. AI is another topic that is very similar. We have the big AI providers come from extra-European countries.
Yeah.
And we throw all of our knowledge, whether some of us might not even know it, but
Yeah.
a lot of our employees throw all of our knowledge into these models. And where's the data going? Have we ever thought about it? So.
Yeah. The head of the guy that launched AI at Meta was a French guy, and we're all
with the French.
Huh?
What do you have with the French?
I know. They broke my heart. What I want to say, but is that an issue of funding as well? Is it because the EU also doesn't have the right kind of funding for that innovation to flourish?
I think it's many things. Funding is one of those. But it's also how easy it is to acquire the funding outside. The speed of funding acquisition outside of Europe is of a different magnitude. And to me, this is, again, we need to walk a careful path. Europe is not the US, is not Asia. And to be honest, we have our own identity that we need to embrace. I think this is the key. For many of the things we discussed today, we need to embrace our identity, build upon it, and use it to make ourselves competitive.
Italians are good at that.
I leave that to the rest of the world to judge, but yes.
Stefan, do you have something to add?
No, it's very true what you were just saying about the it's not about only funding, it's about the speed by which you can implement funding. It's a bit of the same as the speed by which you can implement law and the speed by which you can implement funding. If you cannot do both, you cannot be competitive. When implementation, for example, from the EU, there's attempt to help it. The EU Commission was organizing this working group with the innovation community, the research community in Europe. So I had the pleasure to speak there 2 weeks ago. Interesting, the Commission was asking, okay, what can we do to continue to have innovation in research and development in the context of the AI Act? Well, it's good that at some point we ask ourselves the questions. It was 2 weeks ago. And then you have the research community, which is like, I'm not exactly sure. I'm still going to be competitive because now I am a consortium in between academics, private sector, civil society. We want to use AI tool to develop our innovation, which is going to be an AI product, and we need to ensure compliance at all level on the AI Act, on everything. And we are the only one to do this when externally no one else is doing that. And where is the support? Where is the capacity? And this is funded in a speed that is not exactly matching the need for innovation. So on one end, it's very positive because the Commission is trying, putting some working group, looking into this, having practical solution. But it was asked to me several times, what is the most problematic regulation so far in the EU between AI Act, CRA, and etc.
Choose.
For me, the big problematic regulation is procurement. And how we make fast access to fund and fast spending of fund to have an impact. In the EU, it's still, you want a pen, you need to write 10 papers to get a pen, then you get your pen 6 months afterwards, then you have 6 months to start using it on a piece of paper. By then, someone invent the keyboard. Okay, that's fine, but it doesn't work.
Florian?
Yeah. How can I top this? Yes, procurement, for sure, but that's also where the other role that I was in comes in, right? It goes slow. At the same time, I also like what Paulo said. If you look at the EU and you look at an organization that I just have rejoined, the different cultures, the different identity, there's a lot of opportunity in there. And I'm not sure we always grasp that. I also think that everything is very centric around this town always, very much policy focused, very much regulation focused, where innovation, I think, but this is a personal opinion, should not be regulated. This is something that comes in the mind. You need to capture it and put it in the right process. And I also find, and this is something that I had, because when I did my first tour in ENISA, that was 2017, 18, 19, we started to work on the European Cybersecurity Competence Center, the framework that we've seen established right now, and they're really working hard. But there's a reason why at the speed, and I was in a panel with Luca 2 days ago, the other said at the speed that we want, we can't achieve it. We also need to be realistic to ourselves. Why is that? So what you're opening up is one part of that. At the same time, there's a lot of focus on what we don't have. We like to talk about, oh, we don't have big cloud service providers like in the US. Oh, we don't have big AI. Well, what do we do have, and what are we really good in, and how can we capture that? That's a discussion you hardly hear. And what I really, because that was one of the last things I did at ENISA, sorry for the road down memory lane here, but is we had a conversation at one point with a US government-led project that they would have companies or startups come in, pitch an idea, and then within 1 month they would have funding. Now, I'm not saying that that's the way to go, but the first thing that me and my former colleague thought when we walked out, that would never happen in the EU. And the fact that we think that already is something where I would say, what can we do to change that?
Right.
The Draghi report is quite good there. It does describe some of these options.
Can you just say, for those who don't know, what the European Cyber Competence Centre is?
Well, it's not within my remit. So the European Cybersecurity Competence Center located in Romania. By the way, they're having, I think, also events at the end of October, together with ENISA as well. The idea behind it is capacity building and cybersecurity competence building. So it really started from the idea, how can we build, that's how it started, right? How can we build a cybersecurity industry and market? ENISA obviously very much cooperated with them. Also EXO, European Cybersecurity Security Organization. So we've got a lot of these groups coming together. They have dispersed themselves into sort of a network with 27 different national cybersecurity competence centers. So the framework is there. And we're good at that in Europe, right? Creating the frameworks and putting that in place. But now it comes to innovation. So I think the new executive director being appointed there, Luca, is really looking into this. He's establishing his team. And I really
But they're
hope
essentially
something
going to
comes out.
fund cybersecurity projects, right?
That's the idea behind
It's
it,
like
yeah.
a kind of a Horizon Europe for cybersecurity ideas.
That's the idea behind it. The details, listen, I represent ENISA. They're really, reach out to them, but that's the idea behind it. But it's a good one. It's good to start thinking about it. Yeah, you throw
Journalists
Microsoft,
love to hear
ECC, ENISA at me. Chameleon.
Well,
Yeah.
look, it's been a really interesting conversation. We have about 10 seconds. Does anyone want to add anything that's burning? No? Well, then please join me in applauding these gentlemen for their thoughts. Thank you. We'll now have I don't believe we have a break. I think we go straight into Joshua Pusena, the Senior Space and Defence Reporter at Politico. Thank you very much.